All right. Hey, thanks for coming out, everyone. Um, so some of what we're going to be talking about today is just mostly about how the cannabis industry is kind of shaping and influencing a lot of the psychedelic industry and some of the pros and cons a little bit to that. So I guess I'll start off with like one of the first questions. Besides, well, everyone got introduced here, right? Did he say you as well?
Cameron, for all those who don't know. I'm with Big Psych, the kinship curator, also a board member. Um, Even though we mainly deal within psychedelic medicine, I do have some legacy experience in the cannabis industry, so I can also speak to that.
Right on. Um, One of the first questions, I guess, we'll start with you first here, Cameron, is that how has the commercialization of cannabis changed for the better, and how do you see for the worse at all?
A lot of the people that were the marginalized folks that were incriminated during the legacy era, I don't see those people really being represented within the commercialized industry market of us kind of making that switch. I think Minnesota is currently trying to do a good job in informing uh, folks from black and brown communities or just people that just come from low income backgrounds as to ways that they can equitably get into the market. But I think there still needs to be a lot more work done in regards to actually putting the the money back into the hands of the people, whether that's through grants, other forms of funding. Also, making sure that there's more information classes out there. I know the Minnesota Cannabis College had done a great job as far as informing the public on how to go about getting licenses, making kind of demystifying the whole process. Which a lot of times I think that's one of the biggest issues that you find within a lot of these communities is our access to information. Either we just don't know about it, we don't know who to contact, and also making sure that that we also see the reversal of a lot of the charges of the harm that was done on the legal side. I was one of the individuals that was blessed and fortunate enough to actually have some attention put to my personal situation, which actually got some local legal organization involved to actually help me with the expungement of my marijuana felony. So I'm out here, using my new identity and making things happen. And but even before then, I was still trailblazing different things within, or the work that we do here with Big Psych and other things. But just going back to your question, I think that we need to do more to make sure that the underrepresented people that were a lot of times the individuals that were targeted during the drug war are the ones that are also being able to have a seat at the table when it comes to making money on the other side.
Definitely, definitely. Do either of you guys? Oh, you.
Yeah, I mean, I was 14 when I started using and selling cannabis, and so I'm 26 now. So I've been in the game for 12 years, and the government isn't going out of their way to necessarily make it accessible for people like me to get into the industry. And with the commercialization also, now you have people who haven't been historically marginalized in any way throughout the entire history of this country, who are making buku money off of the legalization of cannabis, the legal sale. And so that affects the black market. That affects people who have been doing the work. That being said, and I know you wanted to speak to the pros and the cons. I will say, um, perhaps now there's certain quality control measures, but I've even found in the medical cannabis industry that they're allowed to do all types of sprays on that cannabis and things that you really should not be ingesting, and now that's considered medical. And so I think that the buyers have a lot to do in terms of educating themselves on what's going on with their product. Not everyone cares to know. You know, a lot of people are like, "Does it get me high?" You know, that's all they'll ask. And there's a lot that you could consider. Like, is it local? Is it organic? Is this a black-owned business? Are these people who have legacy in the field? Things to consider. Yeah, I'll just type there.
Yeah, the question was, how do you think that the commercialization of cannabis has changed for the better or for the worse, or both?
Um, I think changing. I mean, I kind of think of like when we think of like scaling up and commercializing. I kind of just think of the quality of our medicine right off the jump. I definitely know people that have the money to do these grows, but don't give a fuck about things like terpenes or certain cultivars. They just want something that's just gonna get you fried when there's a little bit more than THC in the plant uh, that works with our bodies. I would say that's it.
Hold on, real quick. So to your point right there about them not really caring about the different chemicals and things that are going into our bodies, would you also make a direct correlation between some of the companies that are selling like synthetic forms of psychedelics? Um, I don't. I'm trying to think of something off the top of my head that was like dots, or I can't necessarily remember the name of the product, but I know what is it? Diamond. Well,
Oh,
that's
I think
one.
polka dot.
Polka dot. Yep. Where a lot of times I think that the spirit of the medicine can kind of be lost in the sauce when you start looking at like the commercialization of a lot of these products for the people such as yourself and Courtney and Steve, who are actually homegrown growers. Like you guys know exactly what you're working with. You know your genetics. You know where you got them from. You take pride in those things. Actually talking to other mycologists, and then you have folks that are just kind of like just pumping a bunch of chemicals that may give you a trip, but it's not to me it's not the same thing. So what can you
Absolutely.
say to that?
Yeah, like artificial plumping of,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah. That's a great that's a great topic. Honestly, so I mean, I've been a consumer cannabis since for a while, right? So I don't know if you guys are familiar when medical cannabis kind of happened, um, but around that time, um, everyone wanted some weed money, and so I don't know if you guys are familiar with Spice, or if you
Hmm.
guys remember that era. You can go to the gas station, and this was around the same time.
The K2.
Yeah, this
Okay.
is around the same time they had medical cannabis was becoming a thing. So people are trying to get their money, trying to get their little hustle on. I get it, but I'm seeing the same thing right now with the mushrooms, where legalization or people are seeing mushrooms as like something that's medicinal, and there are people making these products that are just not straight up not good for you. Synthetic. Honestly, a lot of the times it's not even synthetic psilocybin. It's just like different research chemicals in these products, um, and it just goes to I don't know. It for me, um, yeah, I'm seeing a lot of that, and it's not so good. Um, I don't know. The scaling definitely reminds me of that, though. Like where we're at with um, mushrooms, it just brings me. I don't know. It just kind of makes me think of like everyone's on their hustling shit and not so concerned about what we're giving to the consumers and just trying to make some of that quick money.
So do you feel like the trade-off to having a more regulated market would actually keep that to a minimum? Would you prefer that things be regulated in a way that a lot of what is going into these products, say for instance edibles, chocolate bars, that it's actually equitably sourced. We know where it's actually coming from. Like, the same way when you look at certain products you get out of your grocery store, you can kind of tell like what farm it came from, this, that, and the third. Like, would you want to see that be the same within the mushroom industry?
Yeah, absolutely. But I would definitely want those regulations to come from people that are in the community in that space, because a lot of the times regulations could be made from people that are actually investing into these products or behind it. But definitely, of course, that would be legit. I would hope that is the route we would lean towards when mushrooms and other psychedelic products become more available.
Totally.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And that kind of already leads into like a bit of the next question, which is how has cannabis influenced the mushroom and psychedelic culture, and what are the pros and cons, if there's any of those?
Well, I think people are, with the access increase to cannabis and shrooms, I do feel like people are becoming more inclined to associate the two of those with like spiritual cultivation. And yeah, if you already are a smoker or a cannabis user, you'll probably be more likely to experiment with shrooms perhaps. But there's also people who don't rock with cannabis but do rock with shrooms. As far as like you're talking about like the cultural impact of cannabis on like psilocybin use, is that it?
Yeah, like if like for instance, like I know a lot of like some of the same marketing schemes or like same approaches that the cannabis industry has used is like kind of being followed in the same sense
Oh
as
sure.
like the mushroom industry, or
Oh
like not
yeah.
just the mushroom industry but the psychedelic industry in general.
I just gotta say buyer beware, because at the same time as the legalization of cultivating, and now you can start to legally sell cannabis, it's all the tobacco companies buying up the licenses and the farmland and stuff to be able to do that. Like, and besides just the tobacco industries, there's people who have like old colonial money just like making their bread off of this. So they're not necessarily coming into it with the kind of practices that infuse your product with like good energy and like that ensure that it is clean. That's something to consider, and also it puts money in the hands of people who don't need the money and are like doing it for the wrong reasons. So I can say
Yeah.
that, and that's going to happen with psilocybin too. Um, so that's the state of the country. That's going to happen with anything, any product. If it becomes like a clear, oh, there's a market that's not being tapped into, it's going to be exploited by the rich, and they're going to corrupt the product, and they're going to disenfranchise the consumer and like the small organizations that could do it right. So just buyer beware, vote with your dollar. Everything you do with your dollar is extremely important, despite, people say like, oh, put that pressure on the corporations, like it's not us fucking up the planet. Well, we also are only in control of our personal body, each one of us. And so I have to speak to our personal power and remind us that supply and demand is a thing. And if you take away the demand, things change. So
Courtney, can I just real quick to that? And thank you for that. Um, I was just thinking about how even our own local mushroom market is kind of taking a dip in regards to sales, with a lot of the larger conglomerates or outside entities from different states coming in and offering product at a much lower rate, and how I always push for people to buy local. One, to your point about not dealing with these larger, big capitalist organizations, when you at least get it from, say, for instance, the people that you see up here on the panel, and Steve, who was also here, you actually know your grower, you know your cultivator, you know your mycologist. I feel like you guys bring a different type of spirit that you put into your product. I don't even really want to call it a product, but even though it's the container, I'll just put it that way. of what it is that you cultivate. And I can speak firsthand to my experiences with actually partaking in that. It's actually been very different to where a lot of times I will not accept products from other people, even when I'm given free samples and different things like that, because it's kind of like you want to know what you're putting in your body, you know, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So for me, I think that that's things that people should definitely think about, even when you sometimes are contemplating like cost over here might be a little bit more expensive. Sometimes dealing with some of our local folks, but you know that you're reinvesting in in community. You know, these are people that you actually know that you rub shoulders with. That a lot of times also are giving away information the same way that they got it for free. You know, and to make it a much more equitable situation. Like I know Steeg's big thing is, you know, almost like you can give a man a fish or you can teach him how to fish and to eat for a lifetime. I see him go into the community spaces and he's literally showing people how to cultivate their own mushrooms, just like to the point of something you had said the other day about growing our own foods and the importance behind that. Yeah. And the need for us to actually know what's going on from farm to table. So that's my piece.
And I run my own business, Pathmaker Herbs. I source herbs. It's really important for me to be connected to the farmers, right? And on that local note, like if you have a relationship to the person cultivating your product, right? Like for example, Steve one time told me like, yo, like this batch was like a really stressful strain to grow and it like didn't do what I needed it to do in time and it was just hard to work with this strain. And so I think some of my stress might have gotten put into the product and like you know like for him to be able to be that honest and let you know these people in the industry are mass producing this stuff in giant facilities and like you know they're not going to tell you if like you know they have no clue like the quality control because of like how some of the employees might interact with a particular zone of the thing like there's there's all types of energy exchange happening and the mushrooms are absorbent and you know for your cultivator to be able to be like look like you know you should know this about that and like you know I might not even like grow this crop again and here try this one instead like you know like people are honest you know so working with people you know that are in your community that live with you where you live like they're gonna want to build like a real relationship with you as a person, you know, beyond even the business of it all. And so there's just levels of intimacy there that you just can't get shopping in the industry.
Yeah, I wanted to add on to that too. I think the money looks different too when we're talking like the industry. Um, you know, we can mess up as cultivators as with a couple tubs or a couple grow rooms, but when we're talking like millions, like people are gonna try to cut corners with like certain products in our food, with things that we consume. So that's one thing to consider as well. You know, and us farmers, we're not trying to buy a damn Tesla or anything like that. We're just trying to pay rent so we can keep doing what we love to do, and that's help heal people and yeah, keep people safe, give them good product.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. I feel like, you know, the way that things could potentially be is that, you know, right now it's based on, I think, a little bit with accessibility of like, oh, this is just like the easiest product for me to get at this point. So you had to use these resources to get it. But the more that you can like spend time and like go into investing into your community and finding these other people who like might have what you could use, you know, or like there's different aspects of ways that it's almost like someone has a $20 bill, you know, this person owes this person gets paid from that. It's like one $20 bill that runs around, you know, and the more in the community you keep it, it's just like everyone's, you know, it's not like you even need a lot of money at that point. You're just all like working together and it like kind of flows back into itself. And I've felt like a little bit that the psychedelic culture has been doing that pretty well from what I've seen. I don't know if you guys feel the same about that with cannabis, but it doesn't really sound like it, honestly. So I guess leading into the next question is like, what are some of like those red light, yellow light, green lights that you've learned from the cannabis industry and how would you apply some of those lessons that you've learned to the psychedelic industry?
I guess like red light is just like with the well, what we could learn from the cannabis industry was like it ain't just one compound in these plant medicines that have an effect on our body. So like again, right now with if we're talking mushrooms, people are really focused on psilocybin, psilocin, um, and you know, there's definitely more to it than that. And with that being said, we need to be like doing more research on this shit and kind of, you know, looking outside of the box when it comes to these medicines. Um, yeah, that's kind of just it. I think there's just we can tap more into things like mushrooms and other natural plant medicines and kind of just learn. There's a lot to learn from it, and instead of just like uh, you know, trying to focus on what gets you high. Um, so yeah, that's it.
I think one thing that would be advantageous is you guys having like your own like kind of like an accountability kind of some form of a, I don't want to say authoritative, but something that where you guys can kind of actually come together to discuss things that are going on within the local market. When you see certain shifts and certain things taking place, you guys are having centralized conversation around what's being said. I know that you guys get together and you chop it up, but um, when we have the exposure and the ability to touch so many different people from different communities, in order to keep those dollars within our community, um, to see us patronize each other, actually spend with each other. Um, the level of support, I think, is just about the continuation of being intentional. And a lot of times the red light, I don't, because I want to make sure I'm understanding the term, maybe stop doing certain things. Is that what you were trying to say?
Yeah.
Okay, so um, not putting the capitalist mindset first and kind of going back into more of like that esoteric way of doing things through the bartering system, you know what I'm saying, where we're trading or, swapping ideas and let's be real, and not being so trusting to outsiders coming in to infiltrate our community. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you got a lot of folks that might see you doing something good. They like, hey man, let me put a couple of, some sponsor dollars in your pocket, but what are the strings that are going to be attached with that? And asking those questions and trying to figure out like, is this really going to be worth um, possibly actually giving up the ethical aspect of what I got into this business for the trade-off of, having, having your bank account sitting on some M's. There's a lot of folks that have turned down money. I've even watched Steve turn down um, prospective folks that come in and want to just buy out a bunch of stuff at one time because that's just not how he moves. And I respect that, and that's why I stand next to him. So I think it's going to be a constant battle, especially when you have folks trying to feed their families and figuring things out, um, trying to decide on like how they move equitably within the space. But I think the more that we kind of stand together and are able to hold each other accountable, I think that those things will kind of see itself through in a more positive way.
Man, so many good points. Like, I'm glad this is recorded because folks are gonna have to ruminate on a lot of that. Um, the red light, yeah, red light. I wanted to say this. I just feel like a red light about the industry is just like the fact that it exists. Like, I just feel like we needed reparations first. People got their priorities messed up. We didn't need to like legalize cannabis. We needed to expunge everybody's records. We needed to get everyone out of the cages. Put these families back together, and then we needed our bread and our we needed like financial literacy courses for those same families, like, and all that was to be provided by our oppressors who put us in those cages anyway. So, I feel like that's a huge red light about everything going on. It's like capitalism is a beast, and it is moving without heart. So, you know, it's a hard beast to kill.
This is why I do appreciate some of the folks that you guys have been able to rub shoulders with at the conference. Pete and Olivia. I know there's some other folks that are really moving in the direction of living off the land and figuring out how to take back their freedom where we're not becoming so reliant on the system. I get it. Everybody's not prepared or even wants to even go and be a homesteader. But I think there's a lot of power in us looking at a much more communal living model and mindset and how we actually even reevaluate and relearn what community is and what it looks like and how we kind of move within that space, because the more that we actually grow that and really figure out what we define that as for ourselves, the more we can keep these capitalistic motherfuckers out of our pocket and out of our business, and we do our own thing. And that really comes to us like when you talk to a lot of the older generation and you start bringing up subjects like this, they're like, why would we want to do that? Like, really, a lot of people have already made their money. They're trying to basically live out the rest of their days in solitude and comfort and things of that nature. And they don't want to basically change or shift. But there's a lot of young people in the room who are young enough to actually say, you know what, I'm willing to actually give up certain comforts to actually see us change the way that this world has been designed. And just because you see it's been set up a certain way doesn't mean you had to go out the same way you came in. So at some point, we got to decide we want fucking different. And y'all got to go ahead and follow through with that and see it through. And I stand behind y'all 110%.
Definitely. There's I guess, do you guys, any of you guys have any green lights that the cannabis industry has done well, at least, that we could, hopefully.
It's like when you take a million steps back and then take one step forward. It's like I could tout them for having the social equity license, as opposed to other states, but it's just so lackluster. Like I said, we need reparations. This is ridiculous that this is the trajectory they're moving in, to get all these folks with, you know, just a long legacy. I've already said this, of doing wrong. They getting their bread. So I think it's weird.
As soon as I was going to comment on something about the green light, I just thought about like even as we move into a much more regulated industry, um, I've seen in other states, even in California, depending on like the type of model that they're using in the lab, on how they decide what actually does make it to the end consumer, can sometimes still be manipulated in a way that it actually makes money only for a certain group of people or company. So how do you govern the governing body? You know what I'm saying? When those people could also be bought out. So it's a lot of different things that you got to actually think about. Like, this is why I was saying, like, you guys creating more of your own thing now to kind of get ahead of that curve, because the shit can happen like this. Like we're seeing, we got folks that are sitting on the psychedelic task force. We got folks meeting with the governor trying to get these substances legalized. And so we have to really be advantageous in forward thinking about us having these conversations before it happens, because by the time it's here, it's too late. Because, man, money gets shit done. That's one thing I can say. Like, and that's one thing that a lot of us don't not have on our side, is we do not got the bread.
That's real. I guess. I guess a couple things I was just thinking. I worked in medical cannabis, so I think that's one thing that we could that was pretty beneficial that cannabis did, or the cannabis market, whatever or whatever you want to call it, did. The reason being is because so when I worked in cannabis market, I was just a bud tender, and so I was able to meet a lot of people who weren't familiar with cannabis. It was their first time consuming, and I didn't understand how important that was. Right, like I think about like my grandmother if she's looking for an alternative healing, where there's people who've never even heard about this as medicine, um, or even as just a party drug, gives them the opportunity and it kind of guides them um, to a safer way and a better experience with their product or their medicine. Um, so I think that's something cool that was like that I found actually really nice and beneficial with cannabis was having a medical program to slowly get people into it. Because, like, believe it or not, I'm sure a lot of us here consume some sort of plant medicine, but there are people out there that just never even seen cannabis or mushrooms. And then another thing I think, what was cool about, um, you know, or the green light with cannabis that we can learn from it in like the mushroom industry is like branding. You know, a lot of people were able to come up with cannabis brands, and honestly, there are a bunch of cool product out there um, that I think people were able to do once they had some leg room to do some stuff. And I think that's it for me.
Yeah, the harm reduction and everything. I feel like with getting people into the industry slow, it definitely just helps people. I think kind of guide them without having like a terrible experience the first time and totally keep them, you know.
Yeah, and I was totally. It's so weird because I was like, I couldn't believe like I wasn't with medical cannabis until I really was until I worked in as a bud tender, and it definitely gave me a different perspective. Like again, there are people who really need this shit, really need a different alternative for healing, and medicine, pharmaceuticals aren't helping. So I think it's important for sure for people to actually have that harm reduction and good experience and not get scared away.
Y'all know about Rick Simpson oil? It's like a highly concentrated cannabis oil that was developed specifically to help folks going through, I think, chemo radiation. And when I've had it, it comes in these pens, and you like kind of dispense it. You only need about the size of like a DD dot, like a little like period at the end of a sentence, like and you just can eat it. You can just put that drop on your tongue, and it's massively effective. If you build up a tolerance to it, you'll probably still never need more than a grain of rice size. I think products like that probably, not that I know the exact history of it, but I imagine that's something that came out of California's legalization and stuff. Because I mean, that's where everyone goes to get RSO or Rick Simpson oil. But yeah, I think that is a green light maybe, or like that's a good thing. People are probably going to innovate and like come up with new ways to utilize the medicine, get creative and whatnot. So I could say that at least.
What about a little bit to do with like the way that how the cannabis industry kind of went into, maximizing like the THC content and all that, like um, same kind of thing.
Yeah, I met this Rasta and I showed him this bud that I was working with. This was in like high school. He was like, "Oh, we call that pretty weed because it looked pretty, but it is no good. It's like pink and purple and all this stuff, but he's like, that's not real medicine. So yeah, there's that to be said in terms of the mass cultivation. A lot of genetics are getting lost. You can't really get pure sativas anymore. Like there's a lot of things that we're just compromising on for yield and potency, and it's kind of scary. So that makes like those original strains a lot more niche and like I don't know, maybe elite because you might have to travel to another country to get them, and so it's doing weird things. I think to the market. Also, I want to say when legalization happened here, or like as it's happening, I'm noticing less and less people are buying, and I also think it's like a I don't know, post pandemic, like people are just out of bread also, like I know that that's happening too. People are really broke right now, but I also know that there's like a bunch of random stores where you can just go buy a canned beverage, and that can be your that's like a little cheaper than buying a dove, or I don't know, but like and the other thing I'll say to that is those canned beverages, the lining of those cans absorbs some of the THC. So they're still figuring a lot of stuff out. So there's a lot of like mistakes happening, or like products that aren't very good in this transitional time that you got to be aware of. But yeah, I'll just say that.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just say this. So the correlation between the cannabis industry and you were talking about not being able to find like solid sativa strains like back in the day. Um, where do you feel like that correlation comes in when it comes to also the mushroom market? I know Stieg, his his niche is more so with the exotics, and so when we see like outside of that, you got the cubes that are more like the um, more readily available in the market, kind of domesticated mushrooms that have kind of been trained to grow indoors. Do you see also us losing some of the, I guess, some of those strains? Like I remember listening to a documentary or interview with the creator of PE, and he was just saying like you can't really find the original PE anymore. um, and just kind of looking at those things like when you guys have access to these genetics, recognizing that locally you guys are the keepers of these genetics, what are you doing to actually ensure that these things stay around?
Uh, I mean, for if anyone came to the tissue culture workshop yesterday, I did a little talk or workshop, I guess, based on some of those topics as far as like preservation, and that can look like, genetic work. It can look like keeping spores around. It could look like a lot of stuff. We're actually the next talk right after this is going to be quite a bit about that. So if you want to learn more about that, stick around. Um, but I guess one of the other things I wanted to mention about the THC part of it, and that was like a bit of the concentration and the correlation between that and psychedelics and the differences in potency and the recreational uses and just the differences among the two and how that relates to the market and so on.
Are you speaking like about the importance that people put on like how much psilocybin is actually in this particular mushroom, kind of like per se, like how that kind of became the main focal point within the marijuana industry, like
Right, and then we ended up losing,
24%. Yeah.
yeah, so much at that point.
Yeah,
Where,
you started to lose a lot of the flavors, the different specific genetics that had became, that we had grown to love. Certain, because I get to a point now, even when I smoke, you don't get the same taste that you used to get from back in the day when it was just like you had the straight sour diesel or, lemon zest or shark tooth. I mean, there's so many different things out there, but the real perk, now it's like you can barely find those things unless you actually talk to an OG that's like got like a seed bank that he stashed, and he still got access to that. And I hear that there is some of those guys out there, but a lot of times they're just like, you know, what I got is what I got, and unless you like in my circle, I ain't really sharing all that. But I would say it's to me, it's not so much about like which mushroom contains the most psilocybin. I think that it's I my experiences speak to each mushroom is just going to speak to you differently, and some mushrooms won't speak to you at all, and that's kind of like the mystery of the magic behind the mushroom. That's why I love mushrooms, because they've been able to hold their mystery. even as we kind of delve into the science behind them. And I love that about you, Courtney, that you really gotten deep into that. Um, and even your ability to explain and make it relatable and understandable and digestible for people that are just kind of getting into the space. But understanding that even folks who have done all of this work are still learning all the time when it comes to that type of stuff. And yeah, you could have like a mushroom that contains more psilocybin, like an exotic that could be 5 times stronger than a cube. But at the end of the day, like I've heard people of having very profound experiences even with cubes. I remember some of the early experiences I had when I first got into this shit. All of those genetics were coming from you. So I can speak to the fact of that shit was the shit. Like, you know what I'm saying? And so, um, and I remember each one, like the name correlated a lot of times with the experience. Like Pink Buffalo, like I was feeling like warlike, like man, I'm ready to go off and play some football or take somebody's head off. I mean, I was just like, dang, this is crazy. Then other times, you know, he had roller coaster, he had this, he had that. I'm just like, you know, Yeti was a personal favorite. But I say all of that to say that you, as the consumer, you have to build your personal relationship with the mushroom. I think that let that be your guiding voice in how you move in the space, not just being told what to do just off of numbers and percentages. A lot of times that shit gets lost in the sauce. If you think that that's what's most important, then you're kind of really, I feel like, losing the true spirit behind what it's about.
As corporations
So
get greenlit to like mass produce and experiment with growing mushrooms, also, you're gonna be seeing that happen, like where they're selecting for like what's gonna produce the most psilocybin over and over again, or even like doing some genetic manipulation, like synthetic things with the mushroom, and that will end up being in circulation. And so, you have to get wise up on like what you're working with, and just be careful because we're gonna lose like some genetics. We've already lost a bunch of them, and we have to be careful. Yeah.
From my opinion too, it just almost seems like they're jumping the gun a little bit to get into synthesizing all this sort of stuff. I mean, yes, it's just like you would synthesize THC, but like we really don't. I feel like where cannabis was maybe like 15 years ago, where they were just starting to understand terpenes, is kind of like where we are with mushrooms. So like we're like, oh man, okay, there's all these alkaloids. We don't really know what they're all doing. There's different percentages from different mushrooms. So there's like 5 of them that they know of, but that's just the alkaloids. That's not even like the terpene profile or any of these other things that have to do with some of these. So yeah, it's just interesting to like, you know, hopefully protect some of the what we got around so you can still have that maybe later on. And there are a lot more to choose from, I guess, as far as like, active varieties of mushrooms. I mean, you guys know Stieg. Uh, um,
But yeah, like one thing that growers are also doing is keeping things alive. Like finding things that people would never have had access to either geographically or just like money wise, and like growing that here and making it accessible here, and then those genes can live on in another geographic region that they weren't before. People have talked about doing what's it called, guerrilla gardens, but with the mushrooms. I rock with Steve for that. That's so dope. But yeah, like stuff like that, reintroducing spores to the habitat, right? So that it's like unregulated. Like if it's growing literally everywhere, what are you gonna do now? Now
mm.
what? So it's a good chess move.
What are you guys doing in house to like actually? I know when you brought up the percentages and the comparative aspect of like weed and mushrooms. What are you doing to actually do the lab work to actually find out? Is there any work being done locally to be able to know what's going on in these different mushrooms?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I haven't found a connect that can lab test mushrooms, but I might have. So I'm tabling at this event in Shakopee called the Doobie Dabbler on the 6th and 7th of September. It's gonna be lit. There's like cannabis competition, but there's like a corn maze, and there's ATV dirt bike stunts, and there's live wrestling and stuff, food vendors and everything. I have a flyer for it with the QR code at my booth, but they're going to be doing live testing of cannabis on site, so you can bring all your cannabis and they'll like tell you the cannabinoid profile and everything. That I've never seen with mushrooms, you know, and I would love to. So I don't know if access would increase similar with like with legalization, like to your point about like there are green lights and stuff. Like maybe we would get more access to like testing, but I don't know.
There isn't one here yet, but you're in luck. The guy that I'm vending with is he's actually doing a workshop right now. He was supposed to be on he got double booked, but he yeah, he's a tester. So if you guys want to talk to someone that can do that for you, he'd be the one.
And this is with the mushrooms.
Yeah, yeah. If you
Okay.
want to test mushrooms, that is,
Word.
you're like, you know, psilocybin
awesome.
content.
That's like relatively unprecedented for me to hear, so I'm just like, whoa.
I actually have this other like weird device that I got from him and his buddies. It's a little thing that does a chemical reaction, and long story short, you like boil this little like vial. It changes the color. You match the color to like this color, yeah, spectrum chart, and then you're like, okay, it's like within this range here, and I can kind of like see where my potency is, because like mushrooms can vary a lot. Even cubensis can vary quite a lot, you know, for like up to 2% to down to like, you know, almost nothing. So just depending on what you get, you know, you might, someone say, eat 3 grams, and then like that might be something way more potent than you know, need. So just depending on, you know, like you said, gaining a relationship with the mushrooms and like learning what works for you, because what I find to be super interesting is just those profiles, you know, that we don't really know about. So I like to hear about people's experience, like, oh, you ate this, like what was your experience like? Some of the mushrooms for me, like I feel a little bit almost like MDMA like, or like, you know, oh man, I'm so like adventurous right now, I want to get out and like explore. Some are a little bit more, I need to go in the bathtub and like think about my whole life, you know. So like it just depends, you know, on, I don't really know what, you know, so I'm trying to figure out more about it, you know. So like the more, I guess it'd be cool to have some sort of like data input where people are like, oh yeah, this is kind of my experience with it, this is my experience with it, or something. So for like also harm reduction purposes, you know, if you're expecting one thing and get another, it's not so fun.
And some people will say that it's the spirit of the mushroom. So you'll, even with test results of chemical contents within the plant medicine, it's like you might never know. You might never know how it will affect you, or like what the actual journey would feel like. You might not be able to look at all the percentages of all the different alkaloids, all the different constituents, and still be able to determine like what it does or like how you might experience it. Each human body might even process it differently. I mean, there's obviously like a single path that psilocybin takes as it breaks down, but other than the human bodies are unique. Plant medicine is unique, and so you might never know how that would affect you.
I think we're done, y'all.
Oh, stop. All right.
Much love.
All right.